Good morning and happy Sabbath. We want to start with a word of prayer together. Dear God, thank you for this wonderful sunny Sabbath and that we can be together again as a group. Thank you that you gave us this day of rest, that we can come together, fellowship, spend time with friends, and enjoy a day that is separated from the others, where we can put everything aside and focus on learning from your word. We want to ask your blessing for this hour. Give us focus and concentration and enjoyment. We ask in Jesus' name. Amen. So we are today going to look at the fourth part of Ejaculate Responsibly. And I think I'm not going to do a review because we might not finish on time. We finished off at number 19, and the last thing we looked at was we're not honest about pregnancy and childbirth, of how dangerous these actually are and how much risk they carry for the women. And we saw that the danger of being killed by pregnancy or childbirth is in the US, the mortality rate for someone who is pregnant is higher than the mortality rate for a police officer or a firefighter. That's actually quite striking if you think about it, because if you think about the people who have the most dangerous jobs, who are the heroes, and then we would likely think of jobs like that, police officer, people who risk their lives. But actually women also risk their lives when they are pregnant and when they are bearing a child. Of course, that mortality rate in the US is it's higher than here in Europe.
Which chapter are you now?
Well, that was 19.
Okay.
And the reason why there's such a high risk is because there can be a lot of medical issues, but there's also a danger of being murdered at the hands of the partner that is 4 times higher in the US than in other Western countries. Okay, that was just a short flashback to the last chapter, and now we're going to look at number 20. That is about the realities of parenting, that the realities and burdens of parenting are unfathomable. I'll just say parenting is hard. So despite multiple waves of feminism, it's not a secret that the work of raising kids is still largely a burden that falls on women. And we all know caring for a child is a 24/7 occupation. And it's not only that you have to be on for your child 24/7. Most of the time, women also take care of the housework on top of that, because 70% of women who are raising a child, they report that they're also 70% that they're fully or mostly responsible for housework. And 66% of mothers report that they're fully or mostly responsible for childcare. And that's the numbers from the US. And when we have pro-life arguments by anti-abortion or abortion opponents, that huge burden that childcare, raising a child, encompasses, that is often disregarded, not really talked about at all. And there's this readiness, so people are ready to advocate for the life of the unborn. As long as the baby is in the womb, it's like protected and advocated for. But are we willing, or are we willing to also take, or would pro-life activists be willing to take that burden on themselves? Like, do they go through the math? Like, do they realize, okay, this is really a huge burden? And then there's also the fact that most pro-lifers are not pro-adoption. So they are against abortion. And there's a picture that illustrates that. They're against abortion, but then if you ask them, okay, so you're against abortion, you want these women to have these babies, so who of you would be willing to adopt a child if you had the choice? Like, would you sacrifice yourself to adopt a child? And then nobody would speak out. I can share this screen for a second. Share this one. So this image illustrates that. I found it. It shows the hypocrisy of many pro-lifers. They would advocate against abortion, but they wouldn't do anything to, they wouldn't be willing to adopt themselves, but the policies that make adoption easier, or even that it's just regulated in a good way, they wouldn't care about it. It wouldn't have priority, or it would even be made more difficult. Okay, so and plus the housework, it's a huge burden. So, and then I would say we quickly look at 21, then, because there's not much to say about it really, because that one is, pregnancy should not be a punishment. It's needless to say, some pro-lifers, they paint pregnancy as a punishment for women who had sex for fun instead of reproduction. So if they don't want a child, they shouldn't really have sex. And that's of course nonsense. Oh yeah, because if you think about it, then when you get pregnant and it was not planned, and let's say you lose the child because it's really you have a miscarriage. That's a common thing that happens. I think it says here 40 to 60% of embryos between fertilization and birth abort spontaneously. Yeah, you can't influence that. So let's say you had an unplanned pregnancy, you didn't want a child, you get pregnant, and then you have a miscarriage. So then you would actually miss out on your punishment that you're supposed to have. Should you then have sex again and be impregnated again, because then you need to be punished. If you follow the logic, it's yeah. Okay, so I said there is not much to say about it. And number 22.
What's the punishment for men that have sex?
For pleasure.
For pleasure?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah.
We talked briefly about adoption. That it's often adoption is not really wanted by many of the pro-life activism, but also they often use it as an alternative to abortion. So the next one is adoption is not an alternative. For abortion. The statistics show that pregnant people do not consider adoption an alternative to abortion. And that's seen because 91% of people denied access to abortion still do not choose adoption. And related to that, if you look at it, because this book was written after Roe v. Wade was abolished, so the adoption rate today, after Roe v. Wade has been done away with, is the adoption rate stayed the same. So just because many people are now denied abortion, they can't have access to abortion anymore. It doesn't mean now there are suddenly more adoptions. So that shows, these numbers show us adoption is not really a comparable alternative. It's not as if like, okay, abortion isn't there anymore, so now we all choose adoption as our solution. But that's how it's often portrayed. Like, have you thought about giving your child up for adoption instead of having an abortion? But it's not really that easy. It's often portrayed as a win-win situation, like, okay, the child wins the life, and there are people out there who want to have children, so then they can have a child, and who can't have a child, but the trauma that goes with an experience like that is often denied or not talked about. Did you want to say something?
No, I was just thinking this is only looked from the perspective of the woman, but there's also even the perspective of the child.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
The question is really, is this better for the child?
Yeah.
Then, because we do know that a lot of adopted children, not all, but a lot, do have problems if they know that they are adopted.
That's exactly what this chapter is about, because you don't only have the women who report. There are women who report who had both experiences, like they had an abortion, but then they also had given up a child for adoption, and then they can compare the two, and they find that the adoption trauma is actually harder than the abortion trauma. And then there's also the trauma for the child, because research shows that so in the US, it's the way it is that the original birth certificate of the child doesn't exist anymore. So they don't have any information about where they actually come from. They are severed like that. They are not only severed from their birth mother, they would not know where they come from, but also all their DNA links. They don't know anything about their medical history, like what kinds of diseases do I have in my family? Do I run any risks of having such a disease myself? Do I accidentally date someone I'm family with? Because yeah, yeah, so you don't want to date someone you're family with, and if you don't know if you don't know your roots, how would you know? You don't have the medical history, I said that. And there are many adopted children who only found out later in life that they were actually adopted, that their parents are not their real parents. And that can, of course, shake your very identity and your existence. There might be if you're from a different country or a different part of the world, then there might be a culture you never get to know, that you were denied access to, or so there's lots of things that go with adoption. Okay, number 23. There are 0 consequences for men who ejaculate irresponsibly. That's what we began our series with, where we imagined a world where men's bodies were legislated instead of women's. Like that there would be a law that said all men at the onset of puberty, they need to bank their sperm and get a vasectomy. And once they get to a mature age and they're ready to have children, they can either use the banked sperm or reverse their vasectomy. They can have children, and then the vasectomy would be redone once the childbearing stage is over. This would certainly eliminate essentially all unwanted pregnancies. So it seems like people who are serious about reducing abortion would welcome a law like that. But of course, this is just an illustration to show what would it look like? What would the world look like if there were real and immediate consequences for men who cause an unwanted pregnancy? Because how it is now, whether a woman keeps the pregnancy or not, whether she has an abortion or she wants to go for adoption, she is essentially the one who needs to make a decision and deal with the consequences in any scenario. There is no option for the woman to just walk away, but men do actually have that option, and it happens. I mean, there are enough men who just disappear, who never want to take any responsibility, and they can just opt out. If men didn't have that option and would be facing the same burden of consequences, would there be any abortion bans at all? That's the question. It says in the book, there are little to no repercussions for skipping out. So many men keep going along, causing unwanted pregnancies with irresponsible ejaculations and never giving it a thought. When the topic of abortion comes up, they might think abortion makes me uncomfortable. Women should not choose abortion. And they never once considered a man who caused the unwanted pregnancy. Number 24, sperm is dangerous. Sperm should be considered a dangerous bodily fluid that can cause pain, a lifetime of disruption, and even death for some. Sperm can create a person. Sperm can kill a person. Sperm can cause pregnancy, and pregnancy and childbirth can result in physical and mental health issues for women, as well as negative impacts to her social status, job status, and financial status. So what this basically is saying, we are not currently teaching young men, young boys, how to handle their sperm, how to actually be very aware of the danger it is to other people. Men are walking around with a dangerous weapon. If you look at it like that, they are fertile every single day. So, and yeah, we should teach men what it means to take responsibility for their fertility. They should be taught about condoms and vasectomies, because how they manage their sperm has life and death consequences. Then the next one, and that interesting as well. Men have more control of their of their bodies and sexual urges than we like to admit. Society teaches men that, or society teaches us, everyone, that men's sexual urges are much stronger than women's. So the cliche that you hear is that men, they have this natural drive, and it's their innate sex drive because they want to procreate. And on the other hand, you, as a woman, you hear that you don't actually enjoy sex and that you don't actually feel like having sex. And it's what we are taught in a way. And if we, it would be interesting to find out, yeah, in a world that we wouldn't hear these things every day, how things would actually play out. Yeah. But even if it would be so that you have a strong sexual desire, a sexual urge, it's not really something you could use as an excuse, because there are some urges, some physical urges that we all have, and that we have learned to control. Like you have to go pee, or you have to go poop. You don't just pee and poop anywhere, because you have the urge, you have learned to control it. And so, yeah, following from that, it's not asking too much when we expect men to control their sexual urges as well. It's just also, it's more the way we look at things and how we have been taught about dealing with them. And we have spoken enough already about how condoms are made so negative, how they're portrayed so in such a negative way that they take away all the pleasure, and that they're just annoying. But yeah, if we would develop a different attitude towards these birth control methods, they would help you in controlling your urges. Say urinate, defecate.
What is defecate?
Poop.
Huh?
Pee. Okay. Pee and poop. You have those under control.
Not worry about defecate. That's what I learned today.
Men can easily prevent abortions but choose not to. Luckily, medical abortions due to medical reasons, that's a very small percentage actually. So when an abortion is medically necessary, when either the mother has a serious illness or something is wrong with the baby, then there might be an abortion at a later stage in pregnancy even. But luckily, these are only a very small percentage. I don't have it. Do you know it, Lisan? What the percentage is?
No.
I think it was close to 1% or so. But that means most abortions are actually voluntary, a voluntary choice of, for example, women who already have children and they don't want another one for economic reasons.
7%.
7, okay. 7% are due to medical issues. 93% therefore are voluntary abortions. And that is an important point because it means that men could easily prevent voluntary abortions, which is virtually all abortion, because a voluntary abortion it comes from an unwanted pregnancy. And why do you have an unwanted pregnancy? Because there was no appropriate protection. There was an ejaculation that took place in the vagina of the woman, which shouldn't be the case. And then they make a very strong point, which I liked. I mean, I think I have to read it. It's saying, men mostly run our government. Men mostly make the laws. For almost 50 years, a lot of men were focused on what it would take to overturn Roe versus Wade, claiming they wanted to reduce abortions. And then in June 2022, the Supreme Court, made up of mostly men, did overturn Roe v. Wade. 5 decades of work. It's strange when you think about it, because if men were actually interested in reducing abortion, it didn't need to take 50 years. At any point, men could have eliminated elective abortions in a very short amount of time, a matter of weeks, without ever touching an abortion law, without legislating about women's bodies, without even mentioning women. All men had to do was ejaculate responsibly. They choose not to, and today they continue to choose not to. Um, 93% of abortions are elective, as it says here, are a voluntary choice. And 7% are a medical.
Yes, some sources say 1 to 3%.
Necessity. Okay.
So it's different.
Say about 7.
Yeah. Maximum.
Maybe it's
7.
also if you look at the whole world or if you look at one country. So, yeah. But it's a fact that the majority are actually a voluntary choice.
Studies by the 𝗂𝗽𝗃𝗃 Institute, the world's leading pro-abortion research organization, show that only from 1 to 3% of all abortions are performed for medical reasons, but well over 90% are performed for economic and social reasons.
Okay, other sources say only 1 to 3%.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay, what does she say? So 93% of abortion are voluntary. So that must mean there is a reason they don't want the child. That means that it wasn't planned, right?
Yeah. Social and economic reasons. The 𝗂𝗃𝗃 institution.
Life unplanned. Irresponsible ejaculation. Okay. Then number 27. We know what works. And that is accessible birth control. Sex education. And there's the example of the Netherlands, actually. In the US, they have 21% more unwanted pregnancies than in other Western countries. But there are states who have chosen to do an initiative. For example, there was Colorado and St. Louis, I think that's a city. They tried programs that made birth control free and easily accessible. And the result was that abortion rates fell by almost half. So accessible birth control is the number one. And then good sex education, they take the example of the Netherlands, because we have compulsory comprehensive sex education for all grades, of course age appropriate, and the sex ed lessons are very open, so they don't really follow a super strict curriculum. You are actually free to ask any questions, whereas in the US often, well, there is not even how do you say that, a federal regulation. Like every state can take a different approach. Some states don't even require sex education. Some states they do, but they put the focus on abstinence. So they just tell the young people that it's best to just not have any sex. Of course, that's not effective, because what you forbid, you just make it more mysterious, more interesting, and more, yeah, I mean, that the kids will want to try. And other schools, they only share very specific information, or the teachers are only allowed to share very specific information and only address specific questions that are approved within this curriculum. So it's very rigid, and there's not really an open sphere where the children feel safe to ask anything what interests them. Yeah, in the Netherlands, as a result, the rate of teenage pregnancy is 4 times lower than in the US, and the rates of sexually transmitted diseases is also much lower, because there's this sex education that educates about birth control, and birth control is also more accessible. So these are 2 key points. We know what works: accessible birth control and good sex education. So the data about what works to reduce abortion is actually readily available. And yeah, if we add to that we would develop a culture of ejaculating responsibly, combined with accessible birth control and thorough sex education, that would probably bring the number of unwanted pregnancies close to 0. And then probably the most important one, how to take action. It's the last point. Start where you are. for the men especially, commit yourself to ejaculating responsibly and build a culture that expects all men to ejaculate responsibly. You can for yourself make a decision to insist on a condom. You can for yourself experiment and find your favorite type of condom or your favorite method of lubrication that goes with it, and you can really become friends with your condom. And then you can go about and share your best practices with others. You can make an appointment for a vasectomy. You can look into banking your sperm if you're worried about that. Yeah, if you need your sperm later, if you decide to have a child later, there are really options for that. And you can talk, if you already had a vasectomy, you can talk openly about the benefits of it. Or if you are in circles where people joke negatively about condoms and vasectomies, you can react positively to them and correct these myths that go around. We have to change the discourse. We should actually move away from these unproductive debates about women's bodies toward a more helpful and practical discussion on what men can do to prevent pregnancy. Like we said, we need a shift in our culture. We should normalize the use of condoms. It shouldn't be a question like, should I wear a condom? That should actually be a ridiculous question, just as ridiculous as if you would ask, should I wear a seatbelt? Because as we saw earlier as well in the arguments, it's a life and death question for people involved. Demand fact-based sex education. Yeah, we can make that an issue personally, like at the school of our kids, for example. If we are in positions where we can support that, where we actually have influence on that, then that's even better. There should be fact-based sex education at several stages of compulsory school, where it's made clear that there's a difference in fertility between men and women, the implication for pregnancy prevention, so that higher fertility for men results in the fact that men are proportionately, if not more, responsible when it comes to birth control. And that sexual education should be clear that sperm is very dangerous and should be handled with great care. There should be done away with myths that sex with condoms is less pleasurable. And yeah, that sperm should not be deposited in a woman's vagina. And of course, the different types of birth control, especially the ones for men, that we can remove the stigma of condoms and vasectomies. We can, with that fact-based sex education, we can point out and break down cultural expectations and power dynamics around birth control and sex. And also, what is probably also important is that the full spectrum of information is given on pregnancy and childbirth, and parenting, and that these are not easy tasks, that these are not natural and easy processes, but yeah, and they are not risk-free. It's never risk-free to have a baby. Okay, and then increase access to birth control. So the first point is really the one who is personal. You can start where you are. And I think also maybe change the discourse if we change the work on the culture. But the others, they are more from an activist point of view or political even. Increase access to birth control, of course, that... Oh. We should make sure that actual research, for example, research into birth control options for men, that they are actually funded, because as we discussed in one of the arguments, we saw that they actually cancelled research.
Jullie gaan nu. Nee, ik weet niet wat je moet doen. Weet wel wat je moet pakken.
So research into male birth control was actually cancelled because of side effects. Side effects, yeah. Or it was just not funded because it was not considered interesting enough. Yeah, mainly because of the side effects. Because, yeah, I can imagine the reasoning would be, yeah, I mean, we already have birth control methods with these side effects, so it's not that this is something new and groundbreaking that we should put our money in, but still it would make a difference for the women. But that often is not considered interesting enough. And we should, so there should be a higher demand for trained doctors doing vasectomies and also getting better at reversals, because if that, the rate is already more successful than in the past to reverse vasectomies. But if we could raise that success rate even more, it would make things easier, the decision also easier for men to go for these options. We can make the pill accessible without prescription, free. There have been initiatives like that enough. And we can hold politicians accountable, like that they really make this and take this issue serious. If they are focusing on women or celebrating an ineffective ban, then they are really wasting everybody's time. If they actually care about reducing or eliminating the number of abortions in our country, they need to show how they plan to prevent unwanted pregnancies. This is how we can hold politicians accountable. Yeah. So that was the last point of the series. Was there anything that caught your attention that you wanted to comment on, that we should look at more closely?
I have one question or thought. When you mentioned that after Roe versus Wade was reversed, there was not a rise in adoptions. So that was used as an argument to say, look, adoption is not really an alternative. but wouldn't, and I think they do, abortion opponents, they would say, look, now they keep the children and like it solved the problem. Like, they don't give their children away. They like the mothers, they end up being happy mothers. Then you could pull out statistics saying that, well, they didn't really want it, but what do we say to that argument? Like, or does the book cover that?
Yeah, the fact is that they're just having illegal abortions.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Do you know if it's at the same rate?
Um,
Not the same rate, but
there is they give one for other countries that have full bans, because the US doesn't even have a full ban. It's not a full ban yet, and you still have the possibility of abortion pills, right?
didn't they also ban that, like mifepristone, or the
Yeah.
drug? Did they ban it in the US or not? Mifepristone.
I'm not sure if in the meantime that has been banned.
I just remember there was something like they wanted to go after the FDA to. Anyway, that's not the main.
Looking. Just wondering where I read it.
Okay, so
No, I haven't found the number so quickly. But you had something else?
No, I just found that as of June 2024, 14 states have near total bans on mifepristone, like the abortion pill. But
Mhm.
uh, but the Supreme Court rejected limits on the abortion pill. But I guess some states have done their own local or state bans somehow.
Okay.
So it's still available, but not everywhere. No, but no, that was it. So the argument is that, well, abortions, they still happen, maybe not as many, but
Yeah.
in a legal and even in an unsafe way.
Yeah, they gave an example from another country.
Got it.
From countries where there are full bans. I think it was that 64% of the women still had an abortion, even though there is a ban. They just managed somehow to get that abortion, if it's in a different country, whatever. Or if it's in an unsafe way, like middle age methods. Middle age. Middle age. What?
Yeah.
Medieval. Yeah. And it's, of course, it's horrible, but it happens.
Okay, but no, I didn't have any more questions. That was just a thought.
Okay, thank you. Strange, I just read it.
But this topic really is about abortion and like whose fault it is, really shows how messed up our society is, that nobody talks about it being men's responsibility because they don't carry the child. Like, so it's like there's such a mismatch somehow in understanding, yet it's so obvious somehow. Well, it is really obvious.
Yeah, and I mean, when you read the book, you can tend to think, wow, it really just puts all the blame on men, and it's really focusing on men and targeting men all the time. But it's just turning the things really upside down. I think it's legitimate to do that.
To do what? Sorry.
To turn things upside down for a moment and really
Agree.
put things into perspective. It shows us how biased we are. We just find it so normal.
Yeah.
Well, birth control, it's a woman's thing, and it's okay for the woman to take care of everything, and we just accept it, and the book kind of challenges that position. I find it refreshing.
I think a lot would change if somehow laws would be made that would put responsibility on men, because then they would really fear the responsibility and they would take more action. I'm thinking of here in Denmark, really a lot, yeah, in a lot of everywhere basically, but father has to pay the mother something if he's the father of a child, but I guess that's not severe enough, perhaps, like because it's
yeah,
still
it's still happening, and that's what argument 23 was about. There are still kind of no consequences for men who ejaculate irresponsibly.
But I think, yeah, that would fix it from the top and down. I think.
Even when they are required by the state to support, like to pay child support. Even when they pay, let's say they pay, but there are many fathers who don't, and it's even a burden for the woman to go after that money, because even when they do, they often don't get it, or it's a ridiculous amount that they can even live by. That's at least the situation that she describes for the US.
I know that here in Denmark, then it's not the woman's responsibility to get the child support from the father. She just, I think, needs to request it or file a request to the state municipality. Then the municipality pays the child support, and they put the father in debt to the state.
Okay, wow, yeah,
That's better.
Because then it's like you owe the state now. That's the different issue.
Oh yeah, that's really, yeah.
There's also one kind of child support that parents get for having a child, and even
like from this, okay.
Yeah, even if you're like divorced or you're together and the mom has the child, most of the time the dad will still get like half of the child support.
Really?
Yeah.
Right.
So if you want it, you need to ask for full custody of the child.
Okay.
And then you will get it.
Okay.
So
Wow.
But at least I like the idea that, they removed the responsibility
Yeah.
well, I just remember that was how it was like when my mother, she filed for child support or something, whatever the procedure is called. Then the state, if we call it that, the government, they removed the burden of responsibility from my mom to my dad. Like he had problem with the state now, so he better.
That's actually a really clever way to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we can close, I'd say. Dear God, we thank you for the past hour. Thank you for the arguments that we could refresh our minds on them. And yeah, please help us to become advocates for responsible ejaculations, that we can share what we know with others and make our contribution to changing the culture that exists everywhere still. And we thank you for the blessing of this message, that it has changed and shifted our minds so much in a short time. And we thank you for everything that is still to come, and ask you that you would guide us in that process. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.